What are your dreams for your life? Heightened desire and the pressure to say yes to any experience could really pull you off track and into something abysmal. Or you could get very clear on what to commit your energy to. These are all pressures and qualities and questions that this cycle of the Human Design Weather for February 12th to 18th, 2026 bring. Hello, hello, and welcome to the Human Design Weather or Not podcast with me, Margot Fraser. Before we get into the weather, just a reminder that registration for my Staying Rooted through the 2027 Global Cycle Shift program is open. In February of 2027, the background energy that we as humanity lives within is going to change, like the prevailing wind shifting from the way of community. We've been in these frequencies for over 400 years now. To the nature of individuality. Very, very different. We're going to look at what that means to you by looking at your design in relation to our current cycle and the new era global cycle frequencies after I give you a foundation in them, of course. So, as we go through this shift from community to individuality, it's really going to change how we relate to one another. It's going to shift how we relate to animals. There are likely going to be challenges for parents and grandparents who have children that are born under the new frequency while they were born in this current frequency. So I want you to understand what's coming so that you can be aware and not take it personally. There's going to be live calls, including the workshop where I look at your body graph with you in terms of how it aligns to the current cycle and the one that's coming. It's all going to start on February 17th, and there'll be replays for those who can't attend live. So I invite you to participate. If it's correct for you, you can find the link in the show notes or comments for more information, the cost, and how to register. All right, let's dive into this cycle. It begins on February 12th at 10:13 p.m., going until the 18th at 11:51 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, Universal Time coordinates. It's starting February 13th at 5:13 a.m., going until the 18th at 6:51 p.m. So remember to convert that to your own time zone so you know when it starts and ends for you. We always start with the Sun Earth activations because that's 70% of this conditioning field. All right, we've got the Sun moving into gate 30, activating the trait of recognition of feelings. This is the gate of desire, the clinging fire, the fates, and it's located in the solar plexus, our emotional center. That emotional center is both a motor that brings the emotional wave, the ups and downs from hope to pain and joy to sorrow. And it's also our newest awareness center, our emotional awareness. This trait is part of the collective abstract circuitry that's ultimately about sharing the lessons and wisdom of our experiences after we've reflected on them and made sense of them. The keynote for this trait says freedom recognized as illusion and limitation accepted as fate. Well, that might seem a little off putting, but here's what it's speaking to. You are a unique individual, you are incomparable. But this is the gate of desire. And a lot of time in our not self, we're comparing. I want to look like her or him, or I want to be like them. We're looking outside of ourselves. But you have your own traits that are truly part of you. The whole thing about, you can be anything you want, anything you desire. That's the illusion here. There's no freedom in being who you're not. Yes, your specific design has certain limitations, and it's perfect. You're here to be you. We're all individual pieces of the whole, the totality, and in that, we all have our place, which means our limitation to just be who you are is really beautiful. As Ross said, it's a grace, not a punishment. With this trait present, there's an opportunity to gain a recognition of what you're feeling over time. It creates a yearning for change from either end of the hope to pain emotional wave. The hope for something different that drives wanting change, or the pain of something can also drive wanting change. Eventually, this can energize moving to that next step through gate 36, the trait of crisis, where you really enter into the experience. The abstract experiential emotional wave rises on the yearning and then can come crashing down when expectations aren't met. This leads to one of the rules of thumb of the experiential traits: no expectations. And this is probably the most difficult gate of all the abstract gates to really put aside expectations. So that'll be a challenge this cycle. Now we do have Pluto, it's electromagnetic sitting in that gate 41. So we have the full channel, the channel of recognition of feelings that's active for this cycle. So that will be the dominant theme. The channels always dominate over the gates. So when I talk about the channels, we'll get into more of what that's about. The Earth has moved into gate 29, the trait of saying yes, also called the abysmal. It's in the sacral center, the motor that generates life force energy. Its keynote says, the deep within the deep. Persistence, despite difficulties, has its inevitable rewards. This is the trait of saying yes, and saying yes to life is inherently saying yes to difficulties. I mean, that's life. But as we persist through the experience, it will have its inevitable rewards. They'll come eventually. But there may be a number of difficulties as we go through the ups and downs of the experience. This is in the sacral center with its energy to do work that's satisfying. So when you enter into something correctly, meaning according to your strategy and authority, you're going to have the energy to persist through those ups and downs, to surrender to the experience for whatever it brings. With this pressure, saying yes out of correctness is really going to support you with having that persistence and just being able to surrender to the experience. Out of correctness, you may also say no to something, and that will prevent you from putting energy into something that's not actually aligned. Of course, you could also end up saying yes to something out of this pressure if you don't check in with your own authority. And this is going to result in you committing to things and people that are not aligned for you, leaving you frustrated, exhausted, and being overcommitted. If you have this gate in your design, I'll bet you can look back in your life and see this tendency to overcommit. Yes, I'll do that. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can look after that. All right. So expect to see that playing out around you, since most of the world is not so. When we look at the Sun Earth positions together, you may find yourself committing to experiencing your greatest realistic desire, or you may find yourself committing your energy to a fantasy that's not aligned. You could say no to something that's not aligned to your desires, demonstrating healthy boundaries. Or you could say no to something that is aligned, but your not self mind is creating fear around what would happen if you did say yes. Sometimes if you've become aware that you've committed to a lot of things in the past that you shouldn't have, the not self mind then can create fear of being in that overcommitted frenzy again. And then you end up saying no from the mind rather than from your strategy and authority. Well, let's look at our channels now. A reminder that when the transit field creates a channel, everyone that doesn't already have it in their chart is receiving activation of the related traits and qualities. So it has a big impact that way. Of course, we've got our long-term channel that we've been talking about for a while now. It came in December 22nd. It's going to be with us until May 13th. This is the channel of community being created by the nodes of the moon. It's a design of a part seeking a whole. This is a tribal trait that always has that underlying theme of mutual support. The North Node sitting in gate 37, the trait of friendship and family in the emotional center. And the South Node sitting in gate 40, the trait of deliverance and aloneness in the ego center, the heart center. So right there, we've got heightened emotionality and heightened willpower. A reminder that only about 35% of the population has the heart center defined in their charts. So we're going to have a lot of people experiencing this amplified willpower because when it's not defined in your chart, you take in and amplify. So it can be rather pushy energy, trying to force things rather than following one strategy and authority. As the channel of the marriage contract and agreements in general, there's going to be an emphasis on fairness in relationships. Expect all the themes that are associated with this channel to play out, from loyalty and betrayal to jealousy and possessiveness, negotiation of contracts, breakdown of agreements, friendship and affection. It can bring a feeling of being taken advantage of or of being very supported, depending on the relationship and the situation. There's definitely going to be more pressure to come together in family and community. And at the same time, there could be really emotional outbursts if people are feeling taken advantage of. As the design of a part seeking a whole, you may also find more pressure to find your place in family, in community, and spiritually in the totality. Out of that, we could see people joining communities just to have some sense of belonging, even if that community is not aligned for them. There's also the opportunity to understand in a greater way that your design gives you your unique place in the totality. Now, there's a lot in this channel as well about resources. The tribe needs the resources to make sure that everyone in the community is healthy and looked after. So, at a national level, these are trade agreements, that type of thing. And at a family level, yeah, do we personally have the resources that we need? So, those will be highlighted as long as this is present. It's also the channel that is a big, big part of our current global cycle background frequency. As I mentioned earlier, we do have the sun in a channel through this full cycle since Pluto is sitting in that gate 41. It's electromagnetic in the root center. So this is going to bring very strong conditioning since the sun is such a big factor in the conditioning field, such a big pressure. So this is the channel of recognition, a design of focused energy. Of course, it's part of the abstract experiential circuitry. And here it's the drive and pressure to enter into a new experience, starting with that fantasizing in gate 41. What are all the things that I could do? What is that next experience I want to have? What am I hungry for? And then focusing that down to the one that's most of value and reasonable to complete through this channel, and recognizing the feeling that, yeah, that's what I'm really yearning for. That's what I really desire. And then you have to wait with that desire to see if it can really be fulfilled. This is emotional, so it will take time to move from the yearning to the actual entering in to the experience. This channel brings the potential challenge to unknown experience. What's around that next corner? What would it be like to whatever that might be? It brings the opportunity to get clarity from all the new experiences that you might fantasize about having in the future, to narrowing that down to the one that you do truly desire. As I mentioned before, when I talked about gate 30, there can't be any expectations, and there can be only one experience at a time. Otherwise, you dilute. If you're trying to go through multiple experiences at a time, it just dilutes everything down, and you don't really get the depth of the experience and all the lessons and wisdom that could be there for you. That brings us to our long-term transits. The long-term transits are created by the outer planets and the nodes of the moon. They're with us for longer periods of time, years in some cases. So your not self mind can start to think they're part of you, even when it's not something you have in your design. And then when that transit moves on, that can be quite confusing to the mind. Now we'll start with the nodes. They bring that homogenized perspective and direction that we'll see in the world. So we've already talked about this channel, the 3740 channel of community, connecting the emotional center to the ego center, the heart center, with that motor that generates willpower. Specifically, they're in line 4. So let's take a look at those things. For gate 37, the trait of friendship, line 4 is where in the exaltation, those that exhibit exemplary behavior and the highest principles will be seen as the leader over who would traditionally be seen as the leader. In the detriment, only the traditional is accepted. And typically that's the patriarchal leader in a family, would be the father, even if they're not a good role model. In gate 40, well, that brings the ego. Line 4 brings an ego that will organize work to balance work and rest. And at a personal level, that can be really supportive, understanding that work rest balance in a greater way. At the collective level, we're more likely to see the detriment of those that provide the resources, putting their energy into anything that those stroking their ego want them to provide. So this is the workaholic. And ultimately, that willpower ends up being less productive because it's spreading itself too thin. Moving on to the outer planets now, we have both Jupiter and Saturn changing lines this cycle. Jupiter sitting in gate 53, the collective abstract trait of beginnings, expanding the pressure to bring something new. It starts this cycle in line 2 called momentum, with a developmental theme that we learn through our lifetimes of success breeds success. If this gets activated in your chart, you'll be projecting out that you can start something new and see it through. Maybe, maybe not. That's part of the second line. It's just a projection. If you've had success in seeing an experience through, you can use that to build on starting something new. However, earlier success could also have you being impatient for something new and then taking hasty action out of the pressure that this trait brings. Since we'll see the detriment play out in the collective, we'll likely see people jumping into things too quickly. On February 14th at 6:45 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, Jupiter's going to move into line 1 called accumulation. So it's still retrograding here. In the exaltation, this is the pressure to begin something new, not from scratch, but based on the foundation of the old. This is the introspective first line that wants a secure foundation. However, this exaltation may not even be present in the world, as Neptune hasn't activated this trait since 1909. So only if there's someone still alive from that time, that's the only thing that will allow this exaltation to still be in the world. So I'm not really sure if it's still around. In the detriment, there's a holding back in starting something new. The insecurity here that the first line carries tends to dominate. So the detriment says development hampered by criticism and the tendency to withdraw rather than make use of these experiences. The difficulty in starting something new because of the criticism that accompanied the old. Pretty self-explanatory. I don't want to get criticized again. All right. Well, Saturn and Neptune, they are both in gate 25, the individual trait of the spirit of the self, of innocence, and universal love in the G center. The G center is the center that's associated with love, identity, and direction in life. So it's that diamond in the center of the chart. Saturn starts in line 2 called the existentialist, and that's just about being present to what is. Saturn could really bring that discipline to being present, or Saturn could amplify the consequences if you don't. Then it's going to move into line 3 on February 14th at 8:21 p.m. Mountain Standard Time to join Neptune in that same line, which is called sensibility. It has a developmental theme that says the recognition that innocent action does not in itself guarantee success. Very practical. With this line, we have only the exaltation active in the world. Very nice. And it says the power of the ego to withstand failure and still maintain its nature. The power of the spirit to withstand failure, and shock. You can really sense that third line quality of resilience in that. So, very helpful quality that's brought to us in this line. Now, Neptune's depth and the psychic attunement quality it brings could really support and enhance this trait, although its veiling quality could make it more difficult to recognize. Saturn could really help you amplify this quality of empowering your spirit to withstand failure and shock. We have Uranus in gate 8, the individual trait of contribution and holding together in the throat center. It's the voice of, I know I can contribute or not. It's in line 4 called respect. It's very similar to what we see in that line 4 in gate 37 in the emotional center, part of that channel of community, except that here it's the individual contribution. So it's where individuals can bring their unique contributions out to the community in an influential way that has them really seen as the leader, even though they may not technically be the leader. We could also see individual contributions that are not out of true creativity, but instead out of the ego need to impress. Uranus can be sidetracking, so what's contributed could take people off track. Pluto sitting in that gate 41, the collective abstract trait of contraction and decrease in the root center, bringing that pressure to start a new experience. And at this point, well, an experience starts by fantasizing. And then you've got to pair back to which one you really want to have. Now, line 3 that it's in is called efficiency, with a developmental theme that says, in times of decrease, selfishness is justified. This is the third line with its themes of trial and error and bonds made and broken. So efficiency here comes through the trial and error process. This is the energy that fuels the feeling for personal ambition. This is about figuring out on your own through trial and error which experience to go through. Which feeling do you really want? And bringing that drive to do it alone. In the detriment, they'll be wanting to bring others into the experience and share it with them, which means more energy and resources are going to be used. And the other will have their influence as well. So the purity, per se, of doing it your way will be lost. So it brings the pressure of two ways to move through an experience. Overall, the biggest impact is through what's defined in the transit when we look at this cycle overall. Well, this cycle, the homogenizing conditioning is highly abstract, experiential, makes sense of things, with the sun in a channel for the full cycle. And since it activates the root, that abstract gate 53 that Jupiter's activating, the gate of beginnings, is also bringing a strong pressure to start something new. And all of this is occurring within the context of community, with that channel of community being activated by the nodes. So it could bring a real deep desire for change in communities, whether that's at the level of family, community group, nation, and so on. And in the not self world, there are going to be people expressing their hopes and dreams and desires that have all sorts of expectations attached. Right? We said the rule of thumb is no expectations, but the not self mind is always putting expectations on what those experiences should bring. It could bring out desires to possess, expectations in contract and trade negotiations, and a forfeiting of tried and true methods of building communities, of negotiating and coming to agreements in favor of something different. Let's try something new. The end result is increased uncertainty within communities that want change, but what exactly? It may not be clear with all this emotionality we have in the field. And there may be some pretty fantastical propositions with that gate of fantasy. Remember that the transit field brings the traits that have the potential to homogenize us to their conditioning. And so it's what we see play out in the world where most people are not self, rather than living their unique designs. With awareness, you can observe and learn from these frequencies rather than have them run you. All right, that brings us to the end of the cosmic weather for this cycle. If you want to run your own chart, you can go to jovianarchive.com. If you're new to human design and you just want to understand the basics of the body graph at a high level, what's the black and the red about, the different geometric shapes, maybe a bit of background on the system, you can grab my free human design basics mini course at margotgfraser.com/human hyphen design. If you enjoyed this podcast, I'm always so grateful if you can give it a like and subscribe if it's correct for you. Okay, so keep those surfboards out to ride the emotional waves. Let your strategy and authority guide you to what experiences, if any, are really correct for you right now and what the next step is for you. Take your time to get that clarity on what experience, what feeling you're really yearning for. And if you say yes to an experience that's correct for you, give yourself the grace to just surrender to it for all that it brings through the inevitable ups and downs. Just be in it. If you enter into an experience that's not correct, it could be really abysmal. That's why its nickname of that gate 29 is the Abysmal. So take care that what you desire doesn't have you commit to an incorrect experience. Okay, have a great cycle and may you know, love, and live the magic of your true nature. Until next time, bye for now.